here for you to answer questions concerning about classification. Classification, when you talk about classification of organisms, it means that you are trying to categorize the different organisms based on their characteristics they have. And these characteristics, some of them, we can see them with the naked eyes based on the organism, or you have to see them under the microscope. The way they behave, all those things, they help us in classifying the organisms. So when you say classification of microorganisms or classification of organisms, because here we might not look at microorganisms only, all the organisms, we are just getting the basics of the classification. When you say biodiversity, when you talk about biodiversity, it means that the different lives which exist on this earth or in different areas. So bio comes from the word life, and the diverse, how different they are. So because they are different, we need to know where each organism belongs. That's why we have the classification. So let's look at the classification, the way how organisms are being classified using their groups. Classification schemes, a way of organizing biodiversity main groupings. Yes. In this case, we are going to look at the great diverse. What is diverse? Diverse is the difference among organisms. And when you are trying to compare these organisms, it's better to compare the organisms of the same species. So variety brings about the variation, or variation brings about the variety of these organisms you have among the organisms. If you say plants, what are some of the categories plants have? If you look at plants, they don't have the same characteristics. So organisms which inhabit the earth, they are diverse. So these organisms occur in many different forms and sizes. If you look at the elephant, it does not look like the lion. And leave alone the lion, the elephants of Africa might not be the same as elephants of Asia. You might find out that they are different species completely. So what are some of the things we use to classify them? So some of them can be, you can see them with your naked eyes, or some of them, they might not be seen by naked eyes. So let's look at the classification, definition. Classification refers to the grouping and sorting of the things according to the similarities and the differences. How many similarities do we have and how many differences do we have? We bring about what we call classification. So in this case, this classification might not be basically on life science. If you go and then you start sorting the coins of 5 rand, for example, you have 5 rand, you have 10 notes, and then you have 50. So when you have a lot of money and then you start categorizing them based on this, you are classifying them, the 5 rand, the 10 notes, and then the 50 notes. You see that that's how even other organisms are being classified. So this makes it easier for the scientists to study these life forms. Why do we need classification? A question can come like that. Why do scientists carry out classification of organisms? They carry out classification of organisms to make it easier for them to study these life forms which existed. So, when scientists try to classify them, arrange these organisms based on these living things, in science, scientifically, we call it taxonomy. So when you say taxonomy, refers to the science of naming and classifying them. Yes, you name the organism and classify them. And these organisms, they have a wider range, meaning that they are diverse. So naming and classifying these organisms, you don't only stop by naming them, by categorizing them, but you classify them, that this is species this, for example, belongs to phylum this, belongs to this, or that we call it taxonomy in science. So let's look at the history. How did this classification come about? This leads us to the history of classification. The history of classification. How did this classification come about? Okay. Number one, we started with the classification of two groups. Living organisms were classified into two groups at first. That is plants and animals. But not all organisms which are in this world are plants and animals. So at the beginning, they classified them as plants and animals. So we call it a two-kingdom system. This became known as the two-kingdom system, meaning that you have the kingdom for plants and the kingdom for animals. But because scientists, when more information comes in, they take more time to discover, they say that no, there are other organisms which are not plants and they are not animals. What are they? So these organisms, scientists did more research and they found out that more of this is supposed to be discovered. So more scientists came up to know about life, the more advanced classification of classification system. So meaning that it became more advanced. And then now, instead of classifying them into two groups, the scientists now classify them into 5 groups. So it became the 5-kingdom system. From the 2-kingdom system, that is plants and animals, to 5-kingdom system. Who developed this? We need to know who developed this. Robert tried to develop this in 1969, meaning that it's just a new thing. In 1969, the 5-kingdom system was developed. Up to now, we still believe in the 5-kingdom system. We say that, yeah, if you are there and you see that the 5-kingdom system is not enough, or what, you can continue and then discover more. So all organisms now are based on the 5-kingdom system. All living organisms were placed in the 5-kingdom system based on certain characteristics. We say that these characteristics, how do they behave? What do they have on their bodies? Where do they stay? All these things, they help us to classify these organisms. Let's look at what you call eukaryotic organisms. There is another group which came up by classifying these organisms based on the type of the nucleus organisms have. They say that some organisms are eukaryotic. When you say "u" in science, "u" means true. True. Karyot comes from the word from nucleus. Nucleus. So it means that these organisms have what called a true nucleus. That's why here you see that they're saying that True nucleus is a nucleus that is surrounded by a membrane, a nuclear membrane. It means that they're supposed to be surrounded by the nuclear membrane. I hope I'm clear. I'm clear there. Now, let's look at the second group, which we call the prokaryotes. Prokaryotes, these are organisms which do not have a nucleus. Their nucleus is not surrounded by the membrane. You see, if a cell is like this is the nucleus. You see, it has what called a nuclear membrane. But prokaryotes, they don't have a nucleus. No. The nucleus is not surrounded by the membrane. It's not enclosed. Actually, in science, when you say pro, it means before. Before the karyote, before the true nucleus, before the nucleus, the content of the nucleus is not surrounded by, it means that the genetic material, because what we find in the nucleus is the DNA, is the genetic material. You resemble the way you resemble because of the genetic material, because of the type of nucleus, the content which is found in the nucleus. So before the true nucleus, we have what we call prokaryotes. We have even other group which called the eukaryotes, but no, not eukaryotes, akaryotes. Akaryotes, it means that they don't have a nucleus, like the viruses. So here you can find example of bacteria. But here you find an example of a human cell. Your cell, sperm cell, ovum, all those are true nucleus because they come from organisms which have true cells, or the cells with the nucleus. So we also need to know other organisms which called the autotrophic organisms. Organisms which can manufacture their own food. We call them autotrophic organisms. Auto means that they can do themselves. Yes. Trophic is energy level. It means that they can manufacture. They're on the base of the pyramid. If this is the pyramid, you remember having this. Yes. So which trophic level? So if it is autotrophic level, it means that they're at the base of the pyramid. So they can carry out photosynthesis. They can manufacture their own food. What about those which cannot manufacture their own food? We call them heterotrophic organisms. Organisms that are unable to manufacture their own food. We call them heterotroph. Hetero comes from the word out. It means that they get their food. They get their food from outside. So that's why we call them heterotrophic organisms. So we have the autotrophic organisms and we have the heterotrophic organisms. We're going to see these ones again in grade 11. Then you have the saprophytes. Saprophytes, these are organisms which feed on dead organic matter. They feed on dead organic organisms. So they tend to decompose and they suck the juice from these organisms. They must be, the organisms which are being fed on must be organic, meaning that not stones, no. They must be living before. So when they die, they decompose. So the decomposers, sometimes they belong to what you call the saprophytes. They feed on dead organisms. And then now they suck the juice. They make the organisms decay. I was asking some people that, is it good for organisms to decay? And the students were saying that no. Then I asked them a question. If we are not decaying, we are piling from the day Adam was created up to now. You think, where would these people being put if they were not decaying? And number two, Maybe your face you are having has been used by so many people, and it was someone's food, someone's, name it any part of the body. Because decaying is there, it does not lock these nutrients. So when you die, you decay, you release the nutrients. The other plants, they suck those nutrients. They give you a mango, you eat the mango. You're eating the nutrients which were in someone before. So decomposition is very important because it doesn't lock the nutrients. So if the nutrients are not locked up, then it means that these organisms, they can release these nutrients. Non-nutrients are supposed to be manufactured or made. So the cycle continues. That's why saprophytes, these organisms which decompose other organisms when they have died, they're very important in life. We have what called the unicellular organ. All these are organisms. You see, the other people, they're trying to classify these organisms, not based on the 5 kingdoms. They are classifying them. Are they eukaryotes? Are they prokaryotes? Are they, you see, the characteristics they have. How do they behave? Uni means one. Cellular, from the word cell. When you say a cell, yes, why do you call it a cell phone? A cell is a block which is self-reliant. It can exist, it can operate without any help. That's why the one which you use in offices, we don't call them cell phones. We call them telephones or whatever you call it. Why? Because they're not cells. They cannot, they require an external thing. But a cell phone, you put it in your pocket when someone calls you, it's enough. You don't even need to put it on a charger because it has its own power. So unicellular cells, which single cell, it means that it can carry out its own activities. So organisms that are made up of one cell only. So we call them unicellular organisms. Example, you can look at the Paramecium, amoeba, Uglena, all those organisms. We will see them when you go to grade 11. Yeah. So classification is easy as long as you master the terminologies which are found there. You'll be able to answer these questions and pass and continue with life. Yeah, we need more doctors. Okay. If it is not unicellular, if it's not one cell, then it's multicellular. It means that it's many cells, multicellular organisms. That's why we have here many is made up of many cells. So if you have this book, distinction material, expect yourself to get a distinction. When you go to grade 11, still use distinction material in grade 11. Excel in life science, distinction material. When you go to grade 12, still we have distinction material, grade 12. So you'll be able to get distinction, grade 10, distinctions, grade 11, distinctions, grade 12. Perfect. Let's continue. Let's look at the 5 kingdom classification system. The 5 kingdom classification system. What are these 5 kingdoms? These kingdoms include Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plante, and Animalia, which we call the animals. Let's see them. The first one is Monera. When we talk about Monera, we are talking about the bacteria. Bacteria, meaning that these are the simplest. Yes, Protista, when we talk about Protista, we're talking about the protozoans, the best example I can give you, because you don't know this amoeba, I don't know this paramecium. The best example is Plasmodium, which causes malaria. Yes, it's caused by a protista. Yes, Plasmodium. Plasmodia, if it's one. Plasmodium, if there are many. Fungi. Fungi. Fungi, the best example I can give you is the bread mold, the rhizopas. Okay, fungi, mushroom. Bread mold. Yeah, mushroom also is an example of a fungi. Plante, yeah, you know plante. Whatever you see is green plant is a plant there. Yes. Animals, we are not only talking about elephants, talking about the cows, we are talking about the buffaloes, we are talking about the lions. No, man. We also talk about insects, are also animals. Butterflies are also animals. Yes, worms are also animals. We classify them as animals. So when you talk about animals, don't only think about the animals which have 4 legs. No. Centipedes is an animal. Snakes are animals. Fish are animals. You are an animal. So when I call you animal, you must say, yes, sir. Anyway, yeah, we are animals. Is it clear? Yes. So animals, yeah. So let's look at the taxonomy. How do we classify them? Ne? Yes. We said that taxonomy basically is a branch of biology that classifies all living organisms. Who discovered this? This taxonomy in 18. The first person to bring the taxonomy is Linnaeus in 18th century. So this Swedish botanist discovered this system of classification. Up to now, we are using his system. I'm going to ask you, which system is that? And why the binomial? And why do we use this system of classification? Why do we need to classify organisms? And we say that we classify the organisms so that it makes it easier to know about these organisms, and we put them in their categories. But now a question. Why do scientists classify these organisms? Why do they give them scientific names? So Linnaeus and other scientists use the Latin to create the names. So the scientific names can be used to avoid confusion with the common name. Imagine, in Zulu, how do you call God? You know, maybe in Kulunkulu. Yes. In Tswana, how do you call God? I don't think you're going to call him the same. In English, how do you call him? You call him God. In Arabic, how do you call him? You call him Allah. You see that when I come to you and I say Allah, you won't be able to know if you are not coming from that side. When I come and I say Nkulunkulu, you won't be able to know if you're not coming from that side unless you know the language. A person from China, when you say God, he won't be able to see because those are common names based on the language you speak. Imagine now we are using common names to talk about these organisms. You won't be able to know exactly. That's why we have what we call scientific terms, scientific names, so that we avoid confusion. When you say Homo sapien, whether you are from KZN, we are from Pumalanga, you are from Zimbabwe, whatsoever, you are from Mozambique, you are from whatever, Kenya, you are from America, you are from Arabian, you are from whatever, we will call it Homo sapien. There is not any other name. That is Homo sapien. We won't change it. It is Homo sapien. That's why we use scientific names. Homo sapien means what? Human beings. Human beings. The modern human. That's it. But when you say human, in isiZulu, you want to say human, you will say it differently. Yes. When you say Abantu, you can say it like that, but in a different language, it means something different. It could do something different. Yes. So we use the scientific terms to avoid confusion. Don't go to the exam without knowing this. Grade 10. You can't go to the exam without knowing why do we use scientific names to name the organisms. Linnaeus invented what you call the binomial nomenclature. Nomenclature comes from word naming. Binomial comes from word two. When you say two, binomial nomenclature from the word naming. Binomial means two-word system, meaning that we use what we call the genus and the species name. When we are naming these organisms, we use the genus and the species name. So basically, that's what we are looking at. The genus and the species name. But how do we write the genus and how do we write the species name? The genus must start with a capital letter, Homo. Yes. For example, the genus must start with a capital letter. For example, Homo. And then the species name must start with a small letter. I said Homo, not Homo. Sapien. Underline. We have a principle which we use when you're doing this. All right. He also developed a classification system called taxonomy hierarchy, meaning that from the biggest to the smallest, which has the 7 ranks from the general to the specific. When you say kingdom Animalia, a lot of animals are there. But we go to phylum. When you go to phylum, which phylum do we belong to? We belong to phylum Chordata because we have a backbone. Which class do we belong to? We belong to class Mammalia because we have the mammary glands, not bulbs. We belong to class Mammalia. You see, from the biggest to the smallest. Which order do we belong to? Which order? We belong to order primates, like monkeys, like chimpanzees, like gorillas, like all those are primates. They look like human. Family. Which family do we belong? We belong to family Hominidae. Hominidae. So we are under Homo family. Yes. Now, we go to genus and the species. Which genus do we belong to? We belong to genus Homo. This is Hominidae. This is Homo. And which species do we belong to? We belong to species called Sapien. What is the scientific term for humans? We combine the genus and the species. Then we form the species name. There is a difference between the species and the species name. So we belong to genus Homo, and then the species, we belong to species called Sapien. And then we form the name called Homo sapien. So if they ask you, the species name for humans is Homo sapien. That is the, when they ask you the species name, they're looking for the scientific name for that organism, which is Homo sapien. I think I'm clear there. Yeah, classification is a little bit of, you have to know, just to master, just have to know how it operates. Then you'll be able to grasp this. Yes. So, yeah. Now, we are saying that the genus name will be written with a capital letter. I explained it. It must be with a capital letter. And while the species name must be written with a small letter. It must be with a small letter. Yes. After that, we combine them. we combine them. Let's look at this diagram designed for you. Kingdom, domain. Domain is Eukaryota, Prokaryota, depending on whether they belong to Eukaryotics or Prokaryotics. They have a true nucleus or they don't have a true nucleus. Then kingdom, we usually start from here. Kingdom, Animalia, phylum. So which phylum does this red fox belong? You see, Kodara. It means that this and us, we are the same because they have a backbone. Mammalia, they have a mammary gland. Order Carnivora. It means that they have those teeth, the canines. Family, Canidae. When you add this, it means a family. That's why even the other one, we call it hominidae or hominidae whatsoever. Yes. So then genus, the genus and the species, we combine them and you form the scientific name. How do I remember the order that I started from the kingdom, family, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and the species? We use this. King Philip came over for food, for food, for food. Sorry. Yes. For food. Yeah, this King Henry, yes, King Philip came over for food. Yes. Yes. So you can use this to remember exactly what you are supposed to. King is kingdom. Philip is phylum. Came is for class. Over is for order. For is for family. Good is for genus. S is for spaghetti. Sorry, for species. So that's how we can remember. That's how we can remember this. And then this is the simple classification. That's how you can remember the simple classification. Our next class is going to be history of life on Earth. History of life on Earth. So here we are going to look at the geological time scale. Yeah, so we're going to be looking at all this. Just get the distinction material, this distinction material book, then you are saved. When I come back, I'll explain how does the geological time scale work, how does it work, and then I'll explain nicely. Then after I explain everything for geological time scale, we're going to have some lessons for describing what is going to be most likely in the exam for end of term 1. Yes. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and shares to others for our daily new videos. M.Saidi, as usual, a man with no trouble. Thank you. Welcome back to our class. Today, we are going to be looking at classification. I know that classification in grade 10 is a little bit of a problem to learners. So we're going to see how we can try to smash this topic so that when it is time for you to do this classification, it is a little bit easier for you to answer questions concerning about classification. Classification, when you talk about classification of organisms, It means that you are trying to categorize the different organisms based on their characteristics they have. And these characteristics, some of them, we can see them with the naked eyes based on the organism, or you have to see them under the microscope. The way they behave, all those things, they help us in classifying the organisms. So when you say classification,